Monkey D. Luffy looks harmless. He laughs. He smiles. He charges forward without fear. To the world of One Piece, he looks like chaos wrapped in optimism. But that smile hides something dangerous. Because Luffy doesn't fight for justice. He doesn't fight for peace. He doesn't fight to save the world. He fights because he wants to be free. And freedom without limits is terrifying. From the very beginning, Luffy is not a hero in the traditional sense. He doesn't follow laws. He doesn't respect authority. He doesn't care about balance or order. If something stands in his way, he destroys it. Not after careful thought, not after weighing consequences. Immediately. That kind of power is not heroic. It's disruptive. When Luffy punches a world noble, fans cheer. But that moment sends shockwaves through the world. It destabilizes governments, triggers military retaliation, puts entire islands at risk. Luffy doesn't see any of that. He never stops to ask who will suffer next. He just moves forward, and that makes him dangerous. Luffy topples tyrants, but he never stays to rule. He frees nations, but never rebuilds them. He breaks systems, but never replaces them. He leaves the aftermath to others, to civilians, to allies, to people who didn't choose chaos. Real heroes worry about what happens after the fight. Luffy never does. People follow Luffy not because he leads carefully, but because he is overwhelming. His certainty pulls people into his orbit. They abandon their own paths, their own safety, sometimes their own morality, because Luffy never doubts himself. And doubt is what keeps power in check. Luffy doesn't negotiate. He doesn't compromise. If someone opposes him, they become an enemy. Not because they are evil, but because they are in the way. That's when Luffy stops being a hero and becomes a force of nature. Storms don't care who they destroy, they just move forward. And the Marines understand this. That's why they fear Luffy more than emperors. Tyrants can be predicted. Tyrants want control. Luffy wants nothing. And that makes him uncontrollable. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want authority. He doesn't want to rule, which means there is nothing you can take from him, nothing you can threaten, nothing you can negotiate. Luffy creates power vacuums everywhere he goes. He defeats villains and walks away, leaving unstable worlds behind. And unstable worlds create worse monsters. Luffy never checks who fills the void, because he believes freedom will fix everything. That belief is naive. History tells us otherwise. Freedom without structure often turns into violence. And for a long time, that is exactly what Luffy represents. Uncontrolled freedom, unfiltered will, unquestioned momentum. A smiling disaster. But this is where the story changes, because unlike villains, Luffy grows, slowly, painfully, through loss. Ace dies, and for the first time, Luffy breaks. Not physically, emotionally. He realizes that strength without awareness costs lives, that freedom without responsibility leaves graves behind, and something shifts. Luffy doesn't stop being reckless, but he starts carrying weight. He listens more. He protects more deliberately. He trusts his crew instead of charging alone. He still breaks systems, but now he breaks the right ones. He doesn't fight for freedom anymore. He fights for people, for their laughter, their futures, their right to choose their own paths. Luffy never becomes a ruler. And that's important, because his role was never to govern. It was to challenge stagnant power, to shatter immovable systems, to remind the world that authority should never be absolute. Luffy is dangerous, but he is dangerous to tyranny, to false gods, to inherited power, to systems that crush people quietly. He doesn't bring order, he brings opportunity, and then leaves it to others to build something better. That is the difference between destruction and revolution. Luffy is not safe, he is not controlled, he is not gentle, but he is necessary, because without forces like Luffy, the world of One Piece would never change. He is not a hero who saves the world, he is the spark that forces it to move. And yes, that makes Monkey D. Luffy dangerous. But sometimes, danger is exactly what a broken world needs.